Okay, here we go. So what we're going to be looking at tonight, it's sort of a continuation of the two-pick stuff that we did last week with two-pick families, two-pick chairs and two-pick objects. So again, we're going to be working with the line-based templates, but this time we're going to be talking about two-dimensional stuff. Now, in our session 8 folder for tonight, I have a few families that you folks should find useful in the future for detailing work. And I'll point out a few of them that are in here. So we've got plywood and shingles and strapping and blocking. So we're going to look a little bit more at this line-based template. So we looked at the 3D one last week. We're going to look at the 2D one this week, they have similar functionality. Now, the first one I'm going to show is this plywood family. And so what this is a different graphic than you get with the out of the box plywood detail component. So just waiting for Revit to catch up to me here. Maybe what I'll do is, once Revit's done with the upgrade here, I'll show you the software's own plywood. Thank you. And then we'll talk about why I made the one that I did. So this is the plywood family here, and some of you may recognize this kind of a graphic. There's on each end of the plywood is a heavier line, and then we've got a double dashed line in the center. So I made this because I didn't like the detail family that Revit had. So let me just open that up. So here's what the software was providing for plywood. So if you wanted to show in a detail, wood frame detail, that you're using plywood in a certain location, this is what the software was providing, this kind of back and forth diagonal hatch. I didn't like this. So I wanted to make my own, and this is kind of the pattern that we had been taught here at BCIT for detailing purposes, where we had this double tick and then a line through the middle of the plywood, a lighter line, and then a heavier line on each side. And this was done with the two-pick family. So when I am using this in a detail in Revit, you'll see what happens here. So you have to draw it at a fairly small scale. But when you draw this thing across your screen, you can see that it creates those little the double ticks with the notch, and just like the chairs, it'll fit exactly from one end to the other. So for doing things like wood frame detailing, this is good stuff. Now, one of the things that's nice about two-pick detail components is that you can put them into your library. Now, I'll just show you here. This is how I organize my Revit library for my own work. I've got a folder called Revit, and I've got a content folder, and I've more or less copied the Revit directory structure, including that for detail components. So here I've got a number of different detail components that I use for wood frame detailing. And the nice thing is that they're right here in this library, ready to go. Now, something like this plywood detail component, Revit has something similar to it that's already sort of baked into the software, and that is the repeating detail. Has anybody here used repeating details? Okay, so we'll just go back and just a quick refresher on what these repeating details are. First of all, you bring in a detail component that you've already loaded in the project. So a classic example would be something like an eye joist. So let's say that you're using engineered lumber on a project. So here I'm going to bring in a wood eye joist from my library, and here I've got the directory open, and I can just hold it over the Revit icon till it comes to the foreground, and then release it into the view. So now it's going to place one of these eye joists into the view. Now, if you're drawing a section view, and maybe I should, here I'll open up an actual project that I'm working on right now. Now this project that I'm working on right now does have some wood eye joists inside it. Okay, so I'm just going to go to a section here. Okay, so we've got this situation up here where we've got some wood eye joists which are being used for a roof deck. Now I can bring this wood eye joist into my section here, and there it is there. Now it's actually, the joists are spanning the other way, so for me to put it in this order doesn't make any sense, but just to show you folks how it works. So there's my wood eye joist, and then, you know, maybe you folks have done this before where you just copy this at the spacing that you need. So if you needed 16-inch centers, you keep copying it across. That's a little bit laborious, so maybe you might decide to use the array command and array it 19.2 inches. And then you could always, you know, decide if you want to add more objects to the array, but that gets laborious too. So what Revit has built in out of the box is this repeating detail component command. Now you have to have the detail component loaded first. So if you want to do 2x10s at 16-inch on center, you got to have the 2x10s loaded first. So once you get into the repeating detail command, there's this one out of the box, it's called brick. And it does this. It draws bricks. Just stack them up. Now what we need to do is start with this one, and then we've got to duplicate it. So I will call this 14-inch truss joist at 19.2 inches on center. So now with this, I got to switch to that detail component which I've loaded, which is the, here we go, 14-inch joist. And now spacing is 19.2 inches. And I hit OK. And now I can start drawing these things across the screen. Problem is the joists are going the wrong way here, so I've got to change the properties of this so that they're being rotated. So you can decide whether you want to rotate them clockwise or counterclockwise. This would want me to draw them from the bottom of the joist. I want them to draw from the top of the joist, so I'll rotate it the other way. Okay, so that makes it really handy. So now when I want to draw these joists in section, I go and grab my repeating detail component tool on the Annotate tab. It's in the drop-down menu under Component. And then I'll go over and choose the detail component that I've defined, repeating detail, and away I go. So I just start drawing away here, draw a line across the screen, all the way over to the other side. So for doing sections and that kind of stuff, this is great. Now the only thing is that this repeating detail component is defined in this project and not in any other. So if I'm working on another project in the future, I've got to go through the same process of loading in the eye joist and then bringing in this detail component family and creating the repeating detail from scratch. You can also, if you're starting a new project or working in a new project, so here I've got this blank project I just started, I can Control C and then Control V. I can paste a repeating detail from one project into another and bring it in. That is, of course, providing you can remember which project you created the repeating detail in the first place. And at my age, I can't be trusted to remember such things. So the better way to do it is to make a library of this stuff using the two-pick process, which is what we're going to go over tonight. So we're going to go over another example of something that I didn't care for in Revit's detailing library. So hopefully you folks know that when you're using the component tool on the Annotate tab, that Revit has this whole library under the detail items folder of most of the stuff, if not everything, that you would need to do detailing in Revit. So what we're going to talk about now is rigid insulation. So here I'm going to go into thermal insulation and I'm going to find rigid insulation. So this was the rigid insulation that Revit was providing from here. Let me just get a different thickness. Okay. And so let me just switch to a scale where we might be doing detailing at. Okay, so this is how Revit wants to show rigid insulation in a detail. I really find this a little bit, again, graphically, it's not working for me. Look at this. When I rotate it, check what happens with the hatch. Nope, do not want. So what we're going to do is make rigid insulation like you see on page 1 of your notes. Now, I don't know about you, but that's kind of the way that I've seen rigid insulation shown in details for a long time, where you've got lines that kind of cross over 2/3 from one edge of the insulation to the other to indicate the rigid insulation. So what we have is we're going to start off with the part that repeats. So it's a little piece of the insulation that will be used in succession and repeated across those 2 lines that you draw on the screen wherever you want rigid insulation. Now, going back to this detail here, we've got a basement in this project and we're showing bad insulation right now. But if we wanted to show rigid insulation on the inside of the concrete walls of our foundation, what are we going to do? So let's talk about the process. In your Session 8 folder, you will find a family called Rigid Insulation Unit. So when you open this up, this is what you are going to see. So what this family has is a couple of lines at the edges of the insulation, so that represents the 2 faces of our rigid insulation. Rigid Insulation Unit is the name of the family. So what we're going to do is we're going to array this little block multiple times down the length of our cursor as we draw the detail. So what we're going to use tonight for this process is we're going to use the line-based detail item template. So if you folks go to the File menu, hover over New, and choose Family. And in here, we're going to use the detail item line-based template. So much like the other two-pick template that we looked at last week, you can see we've got that length value there. And we're now going to load that rigid insulation unit into this file. So if you've got the detail item template open, I'm actually going to switch back to the rigid unit. So what we're going to do is we're going to load this thing into that line-based template. So you've got the rigid item open, you've got a blank detail item line-based family open, and now we're going to load this rigid unit into the new family that we are creating. So it's going to put one of these things on our screen like this. So I'm going to plunk one of these things down here. Now, once this thing is here in our view, you can click on it and let's go over to its type properties here. So in this dialog box, down at the bottom here, you can see under the other heading, we've got the width and the length and the half length. Now, what the half length was meant to do in this family is to make sure that this little piece, this little line here that's going upwards, was at the halfway point between the beginning of this little block and the end. So the width, of course, represents the thickness of the insulation, and the length at 4 inches represents the length of one of these blocks. Now, what's going to happen if I were to draw this out for you? Let's kind of just think our way through the process here. So if we think about how we're going to set this family up to work, we have the thickness of our block. And of course that is the nominal thickness of the insulation. And this is more or less going to be fixed. So if we say that we're having 4 inches of rigid insulation that we are putting in on the inside of our foundation walls, that's what we're going to do. Now, generally speaking, the length of this little block is going to be similar, so I put a little till character in there, similar to the thickness. But, in the end, it's variable. We're going to be able to vary the length of this little block. Now, why is that? Well, when we think of an application for where this thing is going to be used, so let's say we've got a foundation wall, and we've got a footing here, and so what we're going to do is we're going to insulate the inside face of our foundation wall. So we're going to draw a line in our detail from the top of the wall to the bottom, and Revit's going to populate this whole zone with rigid insulation. And we want the rigid insulation to go right to the first click and right to the end of the second click, like exactly fit inside that space. We don't want Revit saying, well, these things are come in increments of 4 inches from the lumber yard, so, it's going to end up sticking it up a little bit above the foundation wall. No, people have knives, so they can cut that stuff to the exact length that they need. So what we need Revit to do is to ensure that the insulation goes just where the user wants it between those 2 clicks. So the thickness is going to be constant, so that isn't changing. But we're going to end up having to fudge the length of this block as it gets raised. We're going to have multiples of these little blocks from the first click to the second click. So our length here, so this is length. It's more or less the same as thickness, but it will be varying because we'll squish or stretch these little blocks as needed to make sure they fit in between the 2 clicks that the users make on the screen with this down. Okay. Now, I guess that's kind of the first 3 steps there. We're going to flip over to the next page and do to step 4. So now what we're going to do is we are going to move this little block into the place it needs to be. So I'm going to use the align command here. And align, I'm going to start by choosing the left reference plane first, and then the left edge of our little block and locking it. And then I'm going to choose the horizontal reference plane and then the top of our little block and locking it as well. So what's going to happen is that once we're done, this little block is going to have its top left corner locked in as you see here. Now, if you folks look at step 5, Step 5 is where we're going to pre-create the linking parameters for this little bit of insulation. If you guys remember when we did that fixed window and we had 4 of them all in a little group and we created linking parameters, you guys can go back and look at the video for that. What we did is we went into family types and we created new parameters that would allow the user to change the width and height of those nested windows once they were used in the project. And we need to do that here as well with our insulation block, so somebody who's using this nested family can change the thickness of the insulation. And so we could pre-create them here in family types and then make the links happen. I'm going to show you a method that's actually a little bit more automatic than that. So what I want you to do is go and click on that one little unit that you've placed in the view and go to its type properties. So click on your little nested, little rigid insulation unit here and go to edit type. And then scroll down to the bottom where you can see all of these parameters. And we're going to do this together and save ourselves like 5 or 6 different steps. Okay, so where it says width, that is going to be our insulation thickness. So if we come over to the little gray box at the right hand side, go ahead and click it. Now what we need to do is create a parameter for our insulation thickness. So hit the new parameter button. So at the bottom here, to hit the new parameter button, and we're going to make a new parameter called insulation thickness. Insulation thickness. You got to hit this button right here. You got to hit a little gray button at the side, that one right there. So you're hitting a little gray button to the right of width, which is down at the bottom in the type properties. Got it? Okay, so you got to click on our little block here, and you got to go to edit type, scroll down to the bottom, and there it is. So you got to add a new parameter, calling it insulation thickness. Okay, now we got one more parameter to add while we are here. See where it says length here? We're going to make a new parameter for this as well. And now, pay attention. This parameter that we're going to be creating is a instance parameter, and we're going to call it actual unit length. And you'll notice what I'm doing here. I'm going to not do any spaces. I'm just going to make it actual unit length all slammed together with just capitals to help identify which is what word, right? And hit OK.
So an instance is basically when you want to have a variable.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and we'll talk about that in a second. So yeah, actual unit length is going to be an instance parameter. Now folks, if you forget, remember that you can go back to family types and you can find actual unit length. So if it doesn't say default here, it means that it's a type parameter. So we got to go down and hit the pencil icon here and switch it from a type parameter to be an instance parameter. So actual unit length has to be an instance parameter. So we've got a few things kind of ready to go here. Now what we've got to do is we've got to make the array, which is step 6 in the notes. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make the array, and we'll grab the array command here. Now, I am on purpose going to array this thing into sort of the wrong location. So you can see I'm kind of going off here so that the object is too far away from the first one. And I am doing this on purpose. And the reason I'm doing this is so I can make sure that I align the left edge of my second block. I'm aligning the left edge of my second block to the right edge of the first. So I use the align command again, But this time when I use the align command, I pick the right edge of the first block and then the left edge of the second block and lock them. Revit's just telling us here that what we're doing is dangerous, but we're professionals. So we hit OK. Okay, next thing we need to do is align the block again to this reference plane at the top. So we pick the reference plane here, the horizontal one, first. And then secondly, we pick the top of our little block and lock it. So we have our array now. Now what we need to do is make the array parametric. Okay, so the align command is still in force. You need to hit the escape key twice so that it's no longer in effect. So we need to make the array parametric. So to do that, we pick one of the members of the array. We find the connector between the array, that little staple shaped thing, select it. And now that the array connector is selected, we could go up to the ribbon and we could add a parameter for our array. Now, this parameter also has to be an instance parameter so that every time somebody draws this thing across the screen, you can have a custom number of these little blocks that are going to be created. So this parameter we are calling num units. And again, I'm going to forego the spaces. Num units, and make sure it is an instance parameter. Now, what we need to do is do a little bit of work with our formulas here so that Revit can kind of count how many of these little blocks is actually needed. Now, and we'll do this in family types. So go up to the ribbon and find the family types dialog. So we have our array here. So there's number of units, and of course if we hit 4 and hit apply, you can see in the background it's created those 2 extra units and so on. But what we need to do is get Revit to figure out how many of these blocks that we need. Now here's the thing. We said when we were talking about how this thing's going to be built, that general term, oh, of course it's not there anymore. Our block, this rigid insulation block that we're creating, that more or less the length of the thing is going to be kind of similar to its thickness, but variable. So if we're thinking of this entire distance here, so we've got our length, and we want to figure out how many of these blocks we need to have arrayed. Well, it's pretty simple. We can take the length that the person has drawn on the screen and divide it by the insulation thickness. Because our insulation thickness and the length of these blocks is kind of the same right now, so insulation thickness. So if it was a 4-foot length that someone drew on the screen, and it was, I'll say 48 inches, so it's less confusing. So 4 feet, they've drawn a line 4 feet on the screen, because they're going to put that insulation along that length. And our blocks are 4 inches thick, because that's our thickness of the insulation. That equals obviously 12 units. So that gives us a starting point for counting how many of these blocks that we need in the array. So going back to Revit here, we take the length and we divide it by, and it's case sensitive, insulation thickness. Now hit apply and make sure that you get 12 in here. You should. If you don't, wave at me and I will come and help you make sure that your formula is set up. Now, the next part we have to think about here what happens if the length is something else? So if the user draws 2 clicks that are 47 inches, we're still going to get about 12 blocks. But the blocks can no longer be 4 inches long. This is where now we need to vary the length of our block to fit into the 2 clicks that the user has made. So in that case, what we need to do to figure out what our actual unit length is, that's the parameter that we have. So actual unit length equals the overall length that the user has drawn on the screen, so in this case 3'11", divided by the number of units. So now, Revit will do the math for us and will adjust the length of our blocks so it will exactly fit in to the length drawn by the user. So back to family types in Revit. So our actual unit length here equals length divided by, and again it's case sensitive, look at how you spelled num units and make sure you've got that right. And then hit OK. Okay, make sure that you're putting your formulas in the right places. So first of all, you need number of units, which equals length divided by insulation thickness. So insulation thickness is on its own. It has no formula. And then for actual unit length, it's length divided by num units. Yeah, if you put your formula in the wrong row, you could have that error. Okay, so now when I hit OK, everything's dandy. Now, what we should just try and do here is try some different values of length and just see what happens. So I think we should be able to just directly sort of slow double click on it. So 1 click and then find the text, click on it again. I'll type in 4'4", I'll type in 4'5". There. So you folks can see that your rigid insulation is varying its length to fill in that zone. If anybody's not having this work, just wave at me and I'll come and help you out. Okay, so just because you forgot to lock it. So go back and set your value to 4 feet. Okay, now use the align command. Yep, and I have to come in here, I can see this first unit. But you got to go to the edge of it. So you got to go right here. Yeah, click. And nothing again. Unlock it. Okay. Go ahead and hit OK. Now go ahead and change the length value. It should be fine. Perfect. Anybody else? Oh, you just need to add some extra values. Okay, so you hit cancel. So now click on this line. Yeah. Have you already yet? Okay, so go ahead and type here. Just go down to the bottom. Okay, so you see what it says now. Oh, you've got some of this. Okay, so go ahead and hit cancel. Oh, no worries. Okay, so just delete this one. So we'll do it right. So click it. Array. This one right here. Yeah, click anywhere. Come down a little here. Yep. Okay, and then just click on somewhere. Yeah, use the align command here. pick the right edge of this guy. Yep. And then the left edge of that one. So lock it. And then the reference point here. Oh, hit OK to lock. That guy there. That guy there. And lock it. Awesome. So now just escape a couple times. Click on one of these array guys. Hit the stapler. That's good. No, pick that. And then connect it. Number. You have to pick the connector. That's right. Label. Yep. Add router. Num units. And you want. Yep. And capital U units. And then make it an instance router. Okay. Okay. Good. And then family types. So now we need to read one. Oh, we got that. I did one actually in one. So what we need to do is hit, it's okay. Yeah, and then tab to look at one of these guys tab. And then actually edit group. Not group, edit. Fix this guy. Yeah, edit type. And then go down to scroll down the bottom and see length here. Switch, you'll see where it says length, next one up. Not that one, yep, and hit the gray button on the side. Not that one. Yes, and make a new ground report here. Yep, actual unit length. Actual, yep, unit. Yep, length. And it will be an instance ground. Yes, okay. Okay. You go to the next. Yeah, okay. And okay. Okay, that's fine. That's right. Okay, and back to family types. And now, our installation thing. Also, here you have to remember that so length. Okay, so num units equals length divided by. Installation thickness. Yeah, you need space. No T, no capital. Because you do that name of the yeah, it's space estimate. Thickness. Yeah, good. And then just click anywhere. Yeah, and now actual unit length equals the length divided by. Units. Good. Okay. Okay, so just okay. We should have everything. Good. Okay, now when you use this in a project, so don't do anything on your screens, folks. Just watch here. I will show you. This will work as you would hope it might. So load it in here. So I'm just going to go back and I'll save this as, put this on my desktop here, so I will call this. So whenever I'm making one of these families that uses the line-based template, I'll indicate in the name, in the family name of the file name, that it is a 2-pick family. So that way, somebody who's using this knows, hey, I do 2 clicks on the screen and I'm going to get rigid installation. So now, I load this into my project here. Oh wait, no, I'm not going to do it here. I'm going to do it on my, I had a section ready to go there. So I'm going to load it into my file here. Okay, so now I can draw this installation across my detail. Now, that's great here. Maybe if I'm going to draw it over here on this side, so I'm going to draw it along the wall. So here's my rigid insulation, so I'll draw it from the slab going up. Okay, now you can see it's adjusting itself nicely to the length that I draw on the screen, but it's on the wrong side of my cursor. What can I do so I can flip it over to the other side? Anybody know? There's a key you can hit to do this sort of thing. No, it's another one. Spacebar. When you guys are drawing walls, you know you can flip a wall from one side of the cursor to the other. Now, the reason it's not working with our 2-pick family is because we need to add one more little piece to it. So go to the Create tab and find the Control tool. Once you click on the control tool, you'll see all these different 4 controls here, single and double, horizontal and vertical. What we want is the double vertical. And you can put the double vertical anywhere in the view. It doesn't matter where you put it. And you only need one of them. So that double vertical will give you the spacebar flippy feature. So now when I load it back into my project here and overwrite it, so now when I'm using that detail component and I'm starting down here at the bottom and I'm working my way up like so, if I hit the spacebar now, it flips it to the other side of my cursor. And then afterwards, after it's been placed, you'll see that you'll have the double arrow here, so you can flip it even after the fact. So the double control in your family is what gives it that flipping feature. Okay, so you folks can save that and hand it in your share-in folder. So just remember, save it to your own library first, and then right-click and copy, and then right-click and paste this file into your share-in folder. All right, so moving on to page 3. Now, we're going to talk about view templates here in a moment, but I just want to make sure that for those of you who have taken the intro course, we talked about sections and then detail type sections when we talk about these different kinds of section views that Revit can create. Now, if you are in a plan view, you might not appreciate this difference. So I'm in a plan view right now, and when I use the section command, you guys know that you can go over to the properties palette and you can choose from the different kinds of sections that are defined in the project. So if I choose a partial section, I can draw that in place in my plan and I get the new view created. That's old news. And you folks also know that you can come back later and that you can switch this section from being whatever it is here to something like a detail section. So right now, this view, which is called section 3, will list in the folder called partial sections. If I go down and look here, there it is. There's section 3. Now, if I select that section line in my plan, I can switch it to be a detail section. And Revit moves it from a partial section in the project browser to being a detail section. Right? So there you can see Revit created a folder called details and threw the section in there. So nominally or notionally you might think, well, what's the big deal between these two different view types? Well, they can be drawn quite differently and their intended usage is different as well. Where you can really notice the difference between your regular sections and detail sections is when you are not in a plan view, if you're in an elevation or section view. So for instance, if you want to start working up your head, jamb, and sill details for a window, if you go to use the regular section tool, you cannot create a horizontal section. You can only just create a vertical one. But if you use the section command and then choose one of your detail section types, so you've gone to the View tab and you've used the section tool, and then you move over to the Properties palette, and there at the top, choose a detail section. Well, now you can draw your section on any angle that you want. Now, probably for a jamb detail, we want to look downwards. So here it's looking upwards right now, but I'm going to flip it. So there's my jamb detail. So if I want to do a sill detail, detail section. Now, actually here, I'm going to do it this way. So my head, my section head is outside the window. So there's my sill detail. And now here is my head detail. Now if you want your head and your sill detail to look in the same direction, have at it, flip them around, and then you're good to go. And then you can just start to futz with the graphics here to try and shorten them up so that they're not in each other's way. So this is something that a detail section, and only a detail section, can do. And Revit's pretty smart in terms of figuring out where within the depth of this view to place this detail. It kind of knows you were doing it on this wall, so it's going to put that detail right there at that wall. You just need to change the scale so it's appropriate. Get your level of detail ready to go, and then you can start doing the 2D work to finish this detail off. You can see that thing flashing behind me. It's got to be annoying for you folks. I've already told IT about it, and they say it's fixed. Okay. All right, so that is your detail sections. Now we're moving on to detail templates. Now, this file isn't relevant to that, and in fact, we are going to open up a file in our Section 8 folder. The RAC, Revit Advanced Sample Project. So if you guys open up the Revit Advanced Sample Project in the Session 8 folder, we'll talk about view templates. So what view templates are meant to do is to help reduce chaos in your workflow. Now, have any of you used layer states in AutoCAD? So you guys know you can take a series of layers that's on and off in AutoCAD and save that as a layer state. So that's what we're talking about here with Revit. But not only can you save what's been turned on and what's been turned off, you can also save everything else. So the scale of the view, and a bunch of other settings which can save you a bunch of time. Now what you can also do is you can apply a template to a view. So basically you can lock down the view so that nobody can change it either accidentally or on purpose. So we'll talk about that and how you can create this view template and then apply it to a bunch of the other views in your project. So we're opening up the RAC Advanced Sample Project. It might take a few moments just for the upgrade to complete. Okay, so in this file, we're going to go to the 01 entry level. And talk about how these view templates work. Now, this view has a scale and certain other settings that have been set for this view. If you go to the visibility graphics dialog box, you can see that the furniture has been turned off. So what we're going to do is we are going to create a view template from this view so that we can apply it later if something gets accidentally changed. So if you folks go to the View tab, so we are in the 01 entry-level plan view of the Advanced Sample Project. And we're going to go to the View Templates menu, and we're going to create a template from the current view. So Revit is going to tell us to give this template a name. So I'm going to call this 1 to 100. And you'll have to use 1-100. Revit won't allow you to use a slash. 1-100 working drawing plan. One to 100 working drawing plan. So once you've done that, Revit spawns up this dialog box here, showing you everything that's going to be handled by this view template. So it's going to record the scale, and it's going to record all these other features, including what categories are on and off. And you can decide whether you want these features included in the view template or not. So everything in here, like everything like view range, all that stuff, it's all built into the template. So if you want to, confirm that the furniture is going to be turned off in this view template, well, you go to your visibility graphic overrides for the model and hit edit, and sure enough, furniture is going to be turned off. So that's cool. So once you've confirmed all the settings, you just hit OK. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to change a bunch of stuff. Change the scale. I'm going to change it to shaded. I'm going to, let's see here. Basically do what all your colleagues do to you when you're not looking, right? Is mess stuff up. So these things can happen all the time. You've got a crew of people working on a project, and you're like, no, I need to print this right away. How can I quickly fix it so it's back to the way it was? Well, now I can apply the view template back to this view. So now go to the View Templates menu, and we're going to choose Apply Template Properties to the current view. So basically we're going to now employ that view template to change everything back to the way it was. So now you pick your view template that you want to use out of the list and hit Apply Properties. And if you folks look in the background, you're going to see that everything has been fixed back to its original state. Now you can ramp this up a little bit. What you can do is lock this thing down so that nobody can change it. One of the properties of your views, if you go down here, you can see that there is a View Template button. So now what I can do is I can associate this plan view. So we're looking on page 3 of the notes, applying a template. We can now associate this view, 01 entry level, with a view template. So scroll down in the properties palette until you find the view template parameter and click none. So now what we're going to do is we are going to click on the 1-100 working drawing plan and point this plan to this view template. So now when we hit OK, you folks can see that the view template says 1-100 working drawing plan. Now what else does this mean? Look at all the settings I can change now in my plan. None of them. Can't change a thing. Go into my visibility dialog box. It's all grayed out. So if you guys are job captain on a project in your office, a really fun thing to do is to go and add view templates to like every single view in your model and watch everybody freak out. Can't change anything. That's right. No touch. So this is really good for views that you are putting onto sheets. So the main views in your project, elevations, plans in particular. Plans seem to go off the farm so often in projects. So ensuring that you've got your scale locked down, your view range locked down, you can fix a whole bunch of stuff because now, check this out. I can right click, I can control click a few views, right click on them and apply view template to them. So this means I can hit a whole bunch of my views in the project at the same time with a view template. Now, of course, the best thing that you can do is you can go into each one of these views. Another fine thing about Revit here. Do I have to open up the O2 floor view to make changes to it? No. All you have to do is select it once in the browser. Watch the project browser right now, because right now it's showing the properties for level 1. Go over here and click just once on O2 floor. Now it's showing me all the properties of the second floor. I don't even have to open it. So I could change the scale of that view. I could do a whole bunch of changes without actually opening up that view. Now what I can do is I can add the view template to it. Revit now tells me, after I hit apply, that 2 views are being driven from that template. So here I'll do it to the 3rd floor. And here's the cool thing. Let's say that somebody's like, hey, you know what? Can we just, for a quick print, fill in all of our walls so that they're black? I just need to print them off as sort of like a set of presentation drawings. So I get rid of all the material hatches. I just want to see them solid black to show to the client. And you're like, no problem. I go to my view templates and I manage them. And inside here, I find the view template here that we're working with right now. And I can go down and find my walls in my visibility graphics. Go down the walls. And instead of the cut pattern just being default to show materials, I can go into my cut patterns here, override it, make it solid, make it black. So now it means that this view template, in every single case where it's being used, overrides the walls so that they show solid black. Now, because I've got all those plans that are using this template, when I go to level 2, they're all filled in black now. Same with level 3. It's a really quick way that you can control a whole bunch of drawings at once, is by using a view template. So client's gone, hey, these can go back to look like working drawings again. I go back to my view templates, go and find that same one again, find my wall overrides down at the bottom here. So you can see my cut patterns, walls, cut patterns here. Just click the cell and clear the overrides. And so now, because I've changed it in the template, all of the views that are using this template all change at the same time. Very powerful feature, and I use it on pretty much every single project. Okay, so if you folks want to do the exercise on page 4, give you about 10 minutes to work on that.